Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In this episode of The Rise and Fall of the Ottoman Empire, Lessons for Today, we take a deep dive into the foundations of the Ottoman Empire, starting with the reign of Osman Ghazi, the founder of the empire. Osman's leadership, vision and military acumen would lay the groundwork for one of the most powerful and influential empires the world has ever seen. The story begins in the early 14th century, in a time when the Byzantine Empire was on the decline and the Seljuks were falling apart. Amid this power vacuum, Osman Ghazi, a leader of the Turkish tribes in Anatolia, rose to prominence, founding the Osmanli dynasty. His success wasn't simply due to his military prowess. His ability to unite disparate tribes and navigate complex alliances, along with his religious vision, set the stage for the empire's unprecedented growth. Throughout this episode, we'll explore Osman Ghazi's strategic genius, the importance of his alliances with both the Byzantines and other regional powers, and his influence on the succession of rulers who would follow. As we examine the building blocks of the Ottoman state, we'll also reflect on how Osman's legacy shaped the future of his empire, not only in terms of territorial expansion, but also in terms of the cultural, economic, and spiritual institutions that would become the cornerstone of Ottoman success. Join us as we uncover the early years of the Ottoman Empire, where we'll witness the seeds of an empire that would grow to span 3 continents and endure for over 6 centuries. Osman, or Osman Ghazi. He was born on February 13, 1258. Osman Ghazi was the eponymous founder of the Ottoman Empire, first known as a beylik or emirate. While initially a small Turkoman principality during Osman's lifetime, his beylik transformed into a vast empire in the centuries after his death. It existed until 1922, shortly after the end of World War I, when the Sultanate was abolished. Owing to the scarcity of historical sources dating from his lifetime, very little factual information about Osman has survived. Not a single written source survives from Osman's reign, and the Ottomans did not record the history of Osman's life until the 15th century, more than 100 years after his death. Because of this, historians find it very challenging to differentiate between fact and myth. In the many stories told about him, one historian has even gone so far as to declare it impossible, describing the period of Osman's life as a black hole. According to later Ottoman tradition, Osman's ancestors were descendants of the Kai tribe of Oghuz Turks. However, many scholars of the early Ottomans regard it as a later fabrication meant to reinforce dynastic legitimacy. The Ottoman Principality was one of many Anatolian beyliks that emerged in the second half of the 13th century. Situated in the region of Bithynia in the north of Asia Minor, Osman's principality found itself particularly well placed to launch attacks on the vulnerable Byzantine Empire, which his descendants would eventually go on to conquer. Some scholars have argued that Osman's original name was Turkish, probably Atman or Ataman, and was only later changed to Osman, of Arabic origin. The earliest Byzantine sources, including Osman's contemporary and Greek historian George Pachymires, spell his name as Atuman, or Atman, Atman, whereas Greek sources regularly render both the Arabic form Uthman and the Turkish version Osman with theta, teeth or t's. An early Arabic source mentioning him also writes T rather than the in one instance. Osman may thus have adopted the more prestigious Muslim name later in his life. Turkish historian Halil İnalcık argued that the hypotheses that Osman was in fact named Ataman, per George Pachymires, and that he came from the Desti Kipchak north of the Black Sea, are both remote possibilities. Arab scholars like Shihab al-Umari and Ibn Khaldun used the name Othman, while Ibn Battuta, who visited the region during Orhan's reign, called him Usmanchik, also spelled Othmanjik or Osmanjik. The suffix chik or kuk indicates the diminutive in Turkish, thus he was known by the name of Usmanchik, which means Usman the Little, to differentiate between him and the third Rashidun Caliph, Hazrat Uthman Radi Allahu Anhu. Most sources agree that the Ottoman Turks belonged to the Kai Oghuz Turkic clan, who, according to Ottoman traditions, fled their native homeland in Central Asia during the early 13th century due to the Mongol invasions. The clan settled in Anatolia, in a region belonging to the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum. Other sources claim that the Kai clan moved to Anatolia 2 centuries earlier than the previously mentioned date, alongside the Seljuks when they left Transoxiana to Khorasan around 1040 to reside near the city of Merv. Then the Kai clan moved towards eastern Anatolia after 1071 CE, where it displaced other Turkic clans. Later it became involved in the army of Sultan Kaikubad and fought against the Khwarezmians, Mongols and Byzantines, who were raiding Seljuk lands. According to several sources, the Kai warriors were known for filling first lines in battles, and their fighting skills and bravery were among the major factors the Seljuks were victorious in many battles. This fact prompted Sultan Kaikubad to appoint Ertugrul, the clan's emir, as a Mokaddam, lieutenant, and to reward the Kais some fertile lands near Ankara, where they settled and remained in the service of the Sultan for several years. Later, Ertugrul was granted dominion over the town of Sogut in northwestern Anatolia on the Byzantine frontier. He also obtained the title of Akbeyligi, or Jukbey, literally Marcher Lord. Granting this title was in line with the traditions of the Seljuk Sultanate, which is rewarding any clan chieftain who rises to power and is joined by a number of smaller clans, the title of Marcher Lord. However, Ertugrul had far-reaching political ambitions. He sought to expand beyond the lands rewarded to him. Thus, he started raiding the Byzantine possessions in the name of the Sultan, successfully conquering several towns and villages, and slowly expanding his dominion during the half of the century he spent as a Seljuk governor. In 1281, Ertugrul died at nearly 90 years of age. Although the exact date of Osman's birth is unspecified, some sources indicate that he was born on the 13th of February 1258, the exact same day the Mongol hordes invaded Baghdad, killing its inhabitants and ravaging its landmarks. Other sources, such as the 16th century Ottoman historian Kemal Pasazadeh, say that Osman was most likely born around the middle of the 13th century, possibly in 1254/5. Information related to the early life of Osman is limited. However, the few available sources agree that he was born in the town of Sogut, which his father Ertugrul took as the capital of his emirate. The reason for the lack of information available about this stage of Osman's life is due to the fact that the oldest known source about this time period was written about 100 years after Osman's death. Among these sources are Destan-i Tevari-i al-i Osman, the oral history of the Ottomans, written in the 14th century by the Ottoman poet and court physician Taseddin Ibrahim bin Hizir, better known as Ahmedi, 1334-1413, Beket tut Tevari, tr, The Joy of Histories, by Sukrullah, d. 1464, and Tevari-i al-i Osman, History of the Ottomans, by Dervis Ahmed Asiki, known as Asik Pasazadeh, 1400-1484. Additionally, these remaining sources are not the originals, but rather copies, or copies of the copies that were rewritten over the years, leading to a probable loss or altering in the information. In fact, it is accepted that Ottoman, European and Byzantine sources are not very reliable when considering the origins of Osman and his clan. On one hand, the oldest known records originally written by the Ottomans all date back to the period that followed the conquest of Constantinople, 1453 CE. On the other hand, none of the Byzantine historians did refer in their writings to the origin of the Ottomans. As for European historians, these Turkic Muslim peoples were outside of their interest. However, that changed after a century of this period, when the Ottomans began to pose a threat to Europe. The Ottoman historian Kemal Pasazadeh mentioned that Osman was Ertugrul's youngest son, and that he was raised in the traditional nomadic Turkic ways. He learned wrestling, swordsmanship, horse riding, arrow shooting, and falconry from an early age. He quickly mastered the previously mentioned skills, outperforming all his brothers. He was also taught the principles of Islam, and was influenced by the teachings of Sufi sheikhs, mostly his mentor, Sheikh Edebali, and this was reflected in his personality and lifestyle. In terms of proportions, the most popular and classic narration is that Osman is the grandson of Suleiman Shah, who died drowning while crossing the Euphrates River on horseback. The Turkish historian Yilmaz Ostuna considers that Osman's grandfather and Ertugrul's father is called Gunduz Alp, saying that it is more likely that Suleiman Shah is a name stuck in Anatolian popular memory, and it actually refers to Suleiman bin Kutulmish, who founded the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum. Ostuna adds that it is possible that Ottoman historians tried forming a connection between the Ottomans and the Seljuks, especially since the Ottomans appeared on the stage of history claiming to be the legitimate successors of the Seljuks. Based on this, Usman's assumed lineage is as follows: Usman bin Ertugrul bin Gunduz Alp bin Kaya Alp bin Gökalp bin Sarkuk Alp bin Kayisi Alp. Other researchers agree that the connection between Ertugrul, Usman and the Seljuks may have been largely invented by court chroniclers a century later, and the true origins of the Ottomans thus remain obscure. On the other hand, some Ottoman sources indicate further lineage to Usman and the Oghuz Turks, which is closer to myth than reality, saying that these people are descendants of Japheth, son of Noah, and that Usman's genealogical tree contains 52 ancestors or more and ends with the prophet Noah alayhi salam himself. This lineage includes Gökalp and Oghuz Khan, who is said to be the father of Gökalp, and all the Oghuz Turkic peoples, including the Seljuks. Origin of the Ottoman Empire. The exact date of Usman's birth is unknown, and very little is known about his early life and origins due to the scarcity of sources and the many myths and legends which came to be told about him by the Ottomans in later centuries. He was most likely born around the middle of the 13th century, possibly in 1254 fifths, the date given by the 16th century Ottoman historian Kemal Pasazade. 2. According to Ottoman tradition, Usman's father, Ertugrul, led the Turkic Kai tribe west from Central Asia into Anatolia, fleeing the Mongol onslaught. He then pledged allegiance to the Sultan of the Anatolian Seljuks, who granted him dominion over the town of Sogut on the Byzantine frontier. This connection between Ertugrul and the Seljuks, however, was largely invented by court chroniclers a century later, and the true origins of the Ottomans thus remain obscure. According to the Karamanid historian Shikari, Usman was a low-born Yoruk and shepherd. Almost nothing is known for certain about Usman's early activities except that he controlled the region around the town of Sogut, and from there launched raids against the neighboring Byzantine Empire. The first datable event in Usman's life is the Battle of Baphius in 1301 or 1302, in which he defeated a Byzantine force sent to counter him. Usman appears to have followed the strategy of increasing his territories at the expense of the Byzantines while avoiding conflict with his more powerful Turkish neighbors. His first advances were through the passes which lead from the barren areas of northern Phrygia near modern Eskişehir into the more fertile plains of Bithynia. According to Stanford Shaw, these conquests were achieved against the local Byzantine nobles, some of whom were defeated in battle, others being absorbed peacefully by purchase contracts, marriage contracts, and the like. Ascendance to leadership, Usman became emir or bey upon his father's death around 1281. According to some historians, Usman's accession to power wasn't peaceful, as he had to fight his relatives before he got hold of his clan's leadership. One of Usman's major rivals was his uncle Dundar Bey, who might have plotted to kill his nephew, or rebelled against him when the latter decided to attack a small Greek island. Dundar Bey saw that Usman's ambition as a threat that might put the whole clan in danger. However, Usman had to pull out his sword to kill his uncle for disobeying. In the Vilayetname, a book containing the narrations about Haji Bektash Veli, Usman's younger uncle, was the one who became bey after Ertugrul's death. During that time, Usman and several other warriors started organizing raids on Byzantine lands adjacent to Sogut, such as Yahisar, Bilecik, Inegol, and Iznik. As a result, the Byzantine Tekfur, governor of Bursa, was provoked, and he sent envoys to the Seljuk Sultan Alaeddin Kaykubad III, complaining about these constant assaults. Thus the Sultan ordered Gunduz Alp to bring forth his young nephew to stand before him, and so Usman was arrested and sent to Konya. According to this narration, Sultan Kaykubad admired Usman's courage and deeds and didn't wish to punish him. Instead, Usman was sent to Haji Bektash Veli to consider his matter. Usman was warmly received by the Sufi mystic, who then ordered his release, saying, "I have been waiting for someone like him for years." After that, Haji Bektash Veli wrapped Usman's head with the same turban associated with Sufi sheikhs, and sent him back to Konya with a message to the Sultan, asking that Osman to become the Kai Emir. Thus, Osman became the clan's leader. Importance of the Osmanic Beylik location. From a military point of view, the location of Osman's Beylik had a significant impact on his success as a conquering warrior. His capital Sogut was located on a hill in a well-defended position, mediating the main road from Constantinople to Konya. The importance of this site emerged due to the political fragmentation of Anatolia that gave small states greater importance than they originally had. Being an emir to a beylik bordering Byzantine lands, Osman had the opportunity to direct all his efforts towards war and jihad, following the footsteps of the Seljuks with intentions to conquer all Byzantine territories and absorb them into the Islamic Caliphate. Encouraged by the weakness of the ancient empire and its ongoing wars in Europe, Osman had the chance to expand towards western Anatolia, crossing the Dardanelles to southeastern Europe. Commenting on these actions, some historians argue that Osman's strategy of increasing his territories at the expense of the Byzantines was due to his intention to avoid conflicts with his more powerful Turkic neighbors. Politically, Osman showed great skills forming and applying new administrative systems in his beylik. During his reign, the Ottomans made great strides towards transitioning from the nomadic tribe system to settling down in permanent settlements. This helped them consolidate their position and rapidly develop into a major power. Moreover, the Beylik's location in northwestern Anatolia, next to Christendom, imposed a military policy on the Ottomans, which gave them better chances to grow and expand compared to the beyliaks of the interior. Osman's Beylik was also relatively far from both the Mongol invasions and the influence of the powerful Turkoman Beyliks in southern and southwestern Anatolia. Add to that its proximity to the Silk Road linking Byzantine lands in the west to areas controlled by the Mongols in the east, gave it prominent strategic and economic characteristics. Also, the Osmanic Beylik was the only Islamic base facing the yet unconquered Byzantine regions, which made it a magnet to many Turkoman farmers, warriors, and dervishes fleeing the Mongols and aspiring to conquer new lands for economic and religious reasons. Osman's dream. Osman first had a close relationship with a local religious leader of dervishes named Sheikh Edebali, whose daughter he married. A story emerged among later Ottoman writers to explain the relationship between the two men, in which Osman had a dream while staying in the Sheikh's house. The story appears in the late 15th century chronicle of Asik Pasazadeh as follows. He saw that a moon arose from the holy man's breast and came to sink in his own breast. A tree then sprouted from his navel, and its shade compassed the world. Beneath this shade there were mountains, and streams flowed forth from the foot of each mountain. Some people drank from these running waters, others watered gardens, while yet others caused fountains to flow. When Osman awoke, he told the story to the holy man, who said, "Osman, my son, congratulations, for God has given the imperial office to you and your descendants, and my daughter Bala shall be your wife." The dream became an important foundational myth for the empire, imbuing the house of Osman with God-given authority over the earth and providing its 15th century audience with an explanation for Ottoman success. The dream story may also have served as a form of compact. Just as God promised to provide Osman and his descendants with sovereignty, it was also implicit that it was the duty of Osman to provide his subjects with prosperity. Political relations at the beginning of Osman's reign, according to the Bektashi narration, whose accuracy cannot be confirmed since it was only mentioned in Bektashi sources, plus the fact that it did not enjoy much support from the majority of researchers. Haji Baktash Wali was one of the Wafa'iyya Tarika dervishes, a murid of Baba Ilyas al-Khorasani. Once Baba Ilyas died, both Haji Baktash Wali and Sheikh Edebali became among his 60 successors and grandmasters of the Ayyan Rum brotherhood of warriors and farmers who enjoyed great influence among the people. When Osman married Sheikh Edebali's daughter, he secured his control over the brotherhood and soon became their new grandmaster. As a result of this marriage, all the Ayyan sheikhs became under Ottoman control. This has a major impact on the establishment and development of the Osmanic Beylik after Osman's death during the reign of his son Orhan. Some argue that Osman's marriage to Sheikh Edebali's daughter was his first brilliant political undertaking. On the other hand, Turkish historian Professor Simal Kafadar considers that the intermarriage between the Osmanic and Edebali's houses explains the hostilities that later rose between the Ottomans and the Germanids, since the Germanid Turkoman house was rewarded lands and titles by the Seljuks because of their services in subjugating the Babai revolt in 1240, and because Sheikh Edebali was considered by his followers a leader and successor to Baba Ishaq. They all became the focus of attention of the Germanids. Kafadar adds that early in Usman's reign, the young emir showed political ingenuity, forming relations with his neighbors. Usman's alliances transcended tribal, ethnic and religious lines, and he may have followed his instinct and the requirements of his political aspirations, not mistaking the future results of the family connections he created and secured for his son after him. Usman reconstituted the political culture of the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum in line with the needs of his beylik. He was more creative than his Turkoman neighbors in combining Turkic, Islamic and Byzantine traditions. Additionally, the emir also cooperated with the Byzantine tekfurs of the neighboring cities and villages. He forged an agreement, so his clan, whenever they move between grazing areas in the summer, leave their belongings in the Byzantine fortress of Bilashik, and, upon their return, they give its governor a token of appreciation in the form of cheese and butter made from sheep milk and preserved in animal skins, or a good carpet made from wool. This agreement reflects the coexistence between herders, farmers and urban dwellers during Usman's reign. Usman's friendship with Kose Mihal, governor of Chirmenkia, modern Harmankoy, was the culmination of this coexistence between Muslims and Byzantines. As for his relations with other peoples, such as the Mongols, most of whom moved to the borders of western Anatolia, and the Germianid Turkomen, it was hostile. That is because the Turks, in general, despised the Mongols, and the Germianids were probably of non-Oghuz origin. Usman, allied with the Ahyan Rum Brotherhood, they formed organized groups, members in each of which worked in a single trade. The Brotherhood took the responsibility to preserve justice, prevent injustice, stop oppression, follow Sharia law, dictate good morals, and carry out military duties if the need arises, to defend their rights and the rights of Muslims. The emir also allied with newly arrived Turkoman clans to Anatolia. In general, the nomads have always had a strong militarized spirit compared to people installed in the cities. Thus, the clans were more active and effective than their city-dwelling kin. Soon enough, they become the beating heart of the Seljuk border provinces in total, and the Usmanic beylik in particular. Usman also enticed many Turkoman from the region of Paphlagonia to join his forces. These Turkoman were fine warriors, eager for jihad and conquest. Each of them followed a tariqa, an order of Sufism, and was supervised by a sheikh, who taught them the meaning of jihad alongside many Islamic principles. However, another section of these Turkoman did not have close ties to Islam for various reasons. Thus, Usman entrusted them to several sheikhs and dervishes to be given proper Islamic education and be satiated with the values that glorify conquest, aiming to spread the word of Islam. In fact, these sheikhs and dervishes were very enthusiastic about promoting the Turuk of the Khorasani walis, and Usman's request gave them this chance. As for the ruling hierarchy, Usman was firstly subordinate to the Chobanid emir in Kastamonu, followed by the Seljuk Sultan through the Germianid Bey in Kütahya, who was in turn subordinate to the Mongol Ilkhan in Tabriz. During this period, the Seljuk Sultans had lost their power over their local emirs, and the Mongol Ilkhan practiced his authority in Anatolia through his appointed generals, where he requested that every local governor, including Usman, sends him soldiers whenever he requests so. As for the hierarchy of name-delivering in Kutba, imams used to pray for the guidance of the Abbasid Caliph in Egypt first, the Mongol Ilkhan in Tabriz, Seljuk Sultan in Konya, and finally the local bey or emir.
Expansion of the beylik. Until the end of 13th century, Usman I's conquests include the areas of Bilashik, Belakomis, Yenisehir, Melengaya, Inagol, Angelokomis, and Yarhisar, Kopruhisar, and Byzantine castles in these areas. According to Shah, Usman's first real conquests followed the collapse of Seljuk authority when he was able to occupy the fortresses of Kulukahisar and Eskisehir. Then he captured the first significant city in his territories, Yenisehir, which became the Ottoman capital. In 1302, after soundly defeating a Byzantine force near Nicaea, Usman began settling his forces closer to Byzantine-controlled areas. Alarmed by Usman's growing influence, the Byzantines gradually fled the Anatolian countryside. Byzantine leadership attempted to contain Ottoman expansion, but their efforts were poorly organized and ineffectual. Meanwhile, Usman spent the remainder of his reign expanding his control in two directions, north along the course of the Sakarya River, and southwest towards the Sea of Marmara, achieving his objectives by 1308. Usman's last campaign was against the city of Bursa. Although Usman did not physically participate in the battle, the victory at Bursa proved to be extremely vital for the Ottomans, as the city served as a staging ground against the Byzantines in Constantinople, and as a newly adorned capital for Usman's son, Orhan. Ottoman tradition holds that Usman died just after the capture of Bursa, but some scholars have argued that his death should be placed in 1324, the year of Orhan's accession. Conquest of Karakhisar. After establishing his beylik, Usman had to fight on two fronts, one against the Byzantine and the other against the Turkoman beyliks that opposed his rule, especially the Germanids. Usman focused on expanding at the expense of the Byzantines, and since that time, the primary Ottoman goal became the conquest of the remaining Byzantine lands. Some accounts indicate that the first battle Usman launched against the Byzantines was aimed to revenge a defeat that he suffered in the spring of 1284 or 1285, where the Byzantines, led by the Tekfur of Bursa, ambushed him and his men. It is in doubt that Usman knew about this ambush from one of his spies. Nevertheless, he chose to clash with the Byzantines, and he was defeated and forced to withdraw with casualties, including his nephew Koka Saruhan Bey, son of Savchi Bey. Based on this, around 1286, Usman went forward to Karakhisar at the head of a military force of 300 fighters. It was a fortress located 2 leagues away from Inegol, within the scope of Mount Uludag. The emir attacked the fort at night and managed to conquer it, extending his beylik northwards toward Lake Iznik's proximity. The Ottoman victory at Karakhisar triggered the fort's governor, who refused to be a subordinate subject to a Muslim ruler, especially a border emir. So he allied himself with Karakhisar's governor, and both men agreed to fight the Muslims, aiming at retaking all Byzantine lands that were lost recently. Thus, the Ottomans and the Byzantines met again in battle, somewhere between Bilashik and Inegol, where fierce fighting took place in which Usman's brother Savchi Bey and the Byzantine commander Palados were killed. The battle ended with an Ottoman victory. Then, the Ottomans entered Karakhisar, where they, reportedly for the first time, converted the town's church into a mosque. Usman appointed a Qadi, magistrate, and a Subasi, chief of police, for the newly conquered city. Historians differed in determining the date of this conquest, yet none made it prior to 1286, or exceeding 1291. Usman made his new city a staging base of his military campaigns against the Byzantines, and ordered that his name be delivered at the Friday Khutbah, which was the first manifestation of his sovereignty and authority. Usman's latest victory was his greatest up to that date. Seljuk Sultan Alaeddin Keykubat III expressed his deep appreciation for Usman's accomplishments in the name of the Seljuks and Islam, giving him the title of Hadrat Uthman Ghazi Marzuban Ali Jah Uthman Shah, the honorable conqueror and border guardian Usman Shah. The Sultan also bestowed upon Usman the governance of all the land he did conquered, as well as the towns of Eskisehir and Inonu. Moreover, the Seljuk Sultan issued a decree exempting Usman from all types of taxes. Usman also received several gifts from the Sultan, reflecting the new high stature to the Seljuk court. These gifts included a golden war banner, a meter, war drum, a tug, a pole with circularly arranged horsetail hairs, a tassel, a gilded sword, a loose saddle, and 100,000 dirhams. The decree also included the recognition of Usman's right to be mentioned in the Friday Khutbah in all areas subject to him, and was permitted to mint coins in his name. Thus, Usman became a sultan, but lacking only the title. It is narrated that when drums were beaten announcing Sultan Keykubad's arrival, Usman stood up in glorification and remained so till the music halted. Since that day, Ottoman soldiers enacted standing in glorification for their sultan whenever drums were beaten. Conquest of Bilashik, Yarhisar, and Inegol. Soon after the conquest of Karakhisar, Usman marched with his soldiers north towards Sakarya River. Upon his arrival there, he raided and looted the forts of Goynuk and Yenisei Tarakli. Many argue that during this time, Usman received a message from his Byzantine friend Kose Mihal, warning him of a secret conspiracy that was being prepared by the Tekfurs of Bilecik and Yarisar. The two were aiming at killing Osman after inviting him to attend their children's wedding. Osman was disappointed by being betrayed by Bilecik's Tekfur. That is because he considered the relationship with Bilecik to have been built on trust and good faith, as demonstrated by the aforementioned custom of his clan leaving their belongings in this fortress whenever they moved between grazing areas. Osman devised a plan to escape the trap and take over the fortress. He sent 40 of his soldiers carrying some of the clan's belongings to be kept in Bilecik, while most of its inhabitants were outside attending the wedding. Once his men entered the fort, they quickly overpowered its small garrison, and it fell to the Ottomans. Then, Osman went to the feast, followed by some Byzantine knights who were easily ambushed by his men later. A short battle took place in which Osman was victorious, and most of the Byzantines were killed. After that, Osman rode towards Yarisar and took it by surprise. A large part of the fort's garrison was killed, while the rest were taken prisoners. The Tekfur's daughter Holafira was also captured in this action. She soon became Osman's daughter-in-law, having married his son Orhan sometime later, and her name was changed in Bayalun. Afterwards, Osman and several of his men took over all towns and villages surrounding Inegol, before laying siege on the fort itself and taking it with ease. Osman ordered the execution of Inegol's Tekfur since he was known for persecuting his Muslim neighbors, then placed a new garrison for the town, and distributed the loot among his men. Fall of the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum and the Usmanic Beylik's independence. Osman aspired after his multiple victories to expand on two axes, aiming to isolate the Byzantine cities he was looking to conquer. First, he blocked the road leading to Iznik from the eastern side. Then, he advanced from the west towards Lopadion and Evrenos. After that, Osman turned around Mount Uludag from both north and south, avoiding the fortified city of Bursa, connecting with his Muslim neighbors in the southeast. During that time, the Byzantine Empire was preoccupied with ongoing clashes with its powerful enemies in Anatolia, such as the Germianids and the coastal Beyliks, not to mention suppressing unrest and discord in Constantinople and the Balkans. The empire was unable to face Osman's threats, thus, he felt free to expand at the Byzantines' expense, exploiting the current situation. At the same time, the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum was seeing its final days. The Sultanate grip was slowly weakened over its Turkoman Beyliks. Sultan Alaeddin Kaikubad III became deeply unpopular after he purged the Seljuk administration of his predecessor's men with extreme violence. This prompted the Mongol Ilkhan Mahmud Ghazan to call upon Kaikubad to appear before him, and once the latter did in 1302, he was executed and replaced with his predecessor, Ghiyath ad-Din Masud bin Kaikawus, to keep the peace in Anatolia. According to another account, Mongol and Tatar hordes raided Asia Minor in 1300 and killed Sultan Kaikubad in his capital Konya. It was also said that Kaikawus himself killed his rival, coveting his own return on the throne. Another story suggests that Kaikubad escaped and sought refuge in the Byzantine court, where he remained until his death. In all cases, Kaikawus's rule was short-lived, lasting between 4 and 6 years at most, and when he died in 1308 CE, the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum was no more to be mentioned in the historical records, giving the way for the Turkoman Beyliks to emerge as independent states. The demise of the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum gave Osman autonomy over his dominion. He soon dubbed himself Padisa al-i-Usman, sovereign of the House of Usman. After that, Osman set his sights towards conquering the last of the Byzantine cities, towns, and fortresses in Anatolia. According to one account, after Sultan Alaeddin Kaikubad III was killed by the Mongols, viziers and notable leaders met and decided that since the late Sultan had no offspring, one of the local emirs should take his place, and they found Osman perfect fitting the candidacy. Thus the leaders offered the emir the position, and Osman accepted becoming a sultan. It is likely that Kaikubad's and Kaikawus's deaths led to the Sultanate of Rum falling into chaos, and prompted many of its regular soldiers to join the armies of local emirs, including Osman. This gave the latter a great momentum and important military experience, enriching his army for the upcoming conquests. Battle of Beifius. Soon after Osman secured his independence and established control over all fortresses he conquered, he sent messages to all remaining Byzantine Tekfurs in Anatolia, asking them to choose between accepting Islam, Ottoman sovereignty, and paying jizya, or war. Some of these Tekfurs ended up accepting Islam, including Osman's old friend Koze Mihal. who became the Turkic leader's companion and would play a considerable part in the upcoming expansions of the Usmanic Beylik. His descendants became known in Ottoman history as Mihalagulari, children of Michael, plural of Mihalaglu. Other governors acknowledged Usman's sovereignty, while the rest kept their loyalty to the Byzantine emperor. Thus, Usman started harassing their fortresses such as Bursa and Nicaea, which was besieged in 1301. The Ottoman raids also threatened the port city of Nicomedia with famine, as the Ottomans roamed the countryside prohibiting peasants from harvesting wheat. This provoked Bursa's Tekfur, among others, to unite their efforts to eliminate this new emerging Islamic power. In the spring of 1302, Emperor Michael IX launched a campaign that reached south to Magnesia. The Ottomans, awed by his large army, avoided an open battle. The emperor sought to confront the Ottomans, but he was dissuaded by his generals. Encouraged by that, the Ottomans resumed their raids, virtually isolating the emperor at Magnesia. Soon the imperial army started dissolving without engaging in a single battle. That is because the local troops left to defend their homes, which were continuously raided by the Ottomans, and the Alan mercenaries left as well, aiming to rejoin with their families in Thrace. The Byzantine emperor was forced to withdraw by the sea, followed by a wave of refugees. To counter the threat to Nicomedia, Michael's father, Andronikos II, sent a Byzantine force of some 2,000 men, half of whom were recently hired Alan mercenaries, under the Megas Hetaireiarchis, Georgios Mouzalon, to cross the Bosporus and relieve the city. The Byzantine response was a warning for the Islamic border villages and towns. However, when the locals noticed Usman's leadership and military strength, as well as his devotion to Islam, they rallied to support and stand with him to consolidate a new Islamic state that would unite them and form an impenetrable wall against the Byzantines. Several Byzantine deserters joined Usman as well, some of which were liberated prisoners of war who chose to align with him, reportedly due to his good treatment during their custody. Many Islamic warrior brotherhoods also joined the Ottomans. For example, the Ghazi Rums, raiders of the Romans. They were stationed on the borders of the Byzantine Empire and repelled its attacks on Muslim lands since the Abbasid era, gaining great experiences and knowledge in Byzantine strategies and tactics. Another example is the Hajian Rums, pilgrims of the land of the Romans, a brotherhood of Muslim clergy concerned with teaching local villagers and recent converts the basics and different aspects of Islam, and had a side objective of assisting the Mujahideen in combat. The Byzantine and Ottoman armies eventually met on the 27th of July 1302 at the plain of Baphius located between Nicomedia and Nicaea. The Ottoman army consisted of light cavalry under Usman himself, and they numbered around 5,000, while the Byzantines numbered around 2,000 men. The Muslim cavalry charged toward the Byzantines fast, whose Alan contingent did not participate in the battle. As a result of the attack, the Byzantine line was broken, forcing Georgios Mouzalon to withdraw into Nicomedia under the cover of the Alan force. Baphius was the first major victory for the nascent Usmanic Beylik, and of major significance for its future expansion. The Byzantines effectively lost control of the countryside of Bithynia, withdrawing to their forts, which became isolated and fell one by one eventually. The Byzantine defeat also sparked a mass exodus of the Christian population from the area into the European parts of the empire, further altering the region's demographic balance. Coupled with the defeat at Magnesia, the Ottomans were able to reach the coasts of the Aegean Sea, threatening Byzantium with a final loss for their territory in Asia Minor. According to Halil Inalcik, the battle allowed the Ottomans to achieve the characteristics and qualities of a true state.
Byzantine-Mongol convergence attempt. After the victory in Baphius, Usman divided the conquered lands among his kin and army leaders, establishing Islamic hegemony and ending the Byzantine era in his new areas. He gave Eskişehir to his brother Gündüz Bey, Karacahisar to his son Orhan, Yarhisar to Hasan Alp, and Inegöl to Turgut Alp. By that time, Emperor Andronikos II felt the pressure of the Ottoman expansion. The emperor watched in fear how the demographic changes were rapidly taking place in Anatolia, and he decided to stop it. Yet, being recently defeated, Andronikos II couldn't face the Ottomans in an open battle. To add insult to injury for the Byzantine, conflicts were taking place in the Balkans. Thus, Andronikos II had no choice but to try making an alliance with the Mongols in Persia, who were controlling central and eastern Anatolia. To achieve that, the emperor sent a letter to Ilkhan Mahmud Ghazan, offering him a family rapprochement through marriage and establishing an alliance between both empires. At that time, the Mongols were passing through a period of high tension with the Mamluks in Egypt and Syria. This did overwhelm the relations with the Byzantines, especially that Ghazan was preparing for another campaign to Damascus and Palestine after his first invasion in 1299 CE, in which many civilians were massacred and where the Mamluk army suffered a massive defeat at the Battle of Wadi al-Khaznadar near Hims. The Mamluks themselves were preparing for the upcoming war with the Mongols, aiming to wash away the shame of their previous defeat. As a result, on the 20th of April 1303, the Mongols and Mamluks engaged in a fierce battle on the outskirts of Damascus, known as the Battle of Shakhab or Battle of Marj al-Safar, in which the Mamluks won a decisive victory. This devastating defeat had a heavy toll on Ghazan and seems to have contributed to deteriorating his health furthermore, until he died in Qazvin on Sunday the 17th of May 1304. This eliminated any hope of a Byzantine-Mongol alliance and allowed the Ottomans to continue on with their conquests. Byzantine-Catalan alliance. After Ghazan's death, the Byzantine emperor was forced to seek other solutions to the problem of Ottoman expansion. Thus, he hired a company of Catalan mercenaries led by Roger de Flor. The mercenaries had become unemployed after the signing of the Peace of Caltabellotta between the Crown of Aragon and the French dynasty of the Angevins in 1302. The company arrived at Constantinople in January 1303, where they were received by the emperor himself. Then the mercenaries were housed in the district of Blachernae. The emperor arranged the wedding of Roger de Flor to his niece, the 15-year-old Princess Maria Asanina, daughter of the Tsar of Bulgaria Ivan Asen III and Irene Palaiologina. De Flor was named Megas Du, Great Dux, that is, commander of the imperial forces, and was promised a 4 months' payment for him and his men. The Catalans soon crossed to Asia Minor and fought against the Karasids and Germianids, winning a fast victory. Afterward, they resolved to attack the maritime provinces of the Ottomans and moved to the town of Philadelphia, which was besieged by Jakub I of Germain, who suffered a defeat at the hands of the Catalans and was forced to lift his siege and retreat. This victory proved that, had Byzantium been able to gather sufficient military forces and material capabilities, it would have been able to eliminate the emerging Turkic power, but it had neither. It was not long before the Catalans abandoned fighting the Muslims and turned their attention towards the Byzantines themselves. The reason for that was that the local population of Magnesia beheaded the Catalan garrison and stole its treasure, which infuriated Roger de Flor and made him march towards that city intending on revenge. The Byzantines were horrified by the mercenaries' attacks and became preoccupied in defending themselves. Roger de Flor was soon killed by order of the emperor's son, Michael IX, who saw the indiscipline of the Catalan mercenaries as a growing danger, as did the people of Constantinople, who rose up against the Catalans and killed many of them. Once the news reached the main Catalan force in Gallipoli, they went on a killing spree of their own, killing all the local Byzantines. Soon after this, the Byzantines and the Catalans were at war with each other, giving way to Usman to move on with his conquests. Conquest of Yenisehir and its surroundings. After securing his northern borders by reaching the Black and Marmara Seas, Usman turned his attention towards the southern borders of his Beylik. Thus, he attacked the Byzantine towns, villages and fortresses surrounding the city of Yenisehir, preparing to conquer it. Usman sent a large campaign to the fortress of Yavandisar and annexed it. Then he attacked Yenisehir, took it with ease and made it his temporary capital, after fortifying and strengthening its defenses. Soon after that, Usman started sending more campaigns against the remaining Byzantine cities, conquering several fortresses including Lefko, Akhisar, Koçhisar, Yeniçehisar, Marmarakik and Kopruhisar. In fact, conquering the aforementioned forts aimed at imposing a security belt around Yenisehir. Thus, Usman surrounded it with a series of front forts to ward off any invasions. Conquest of Bursa. With Yenisehir in his hands, Usman focused his efforts on isolated, large cities starting with Bursa, unaware that this would be his last campaign. He gave the orders to start building 2 forts overseeing and surrounding the city. Then, when the construction was completed, Usman provided the forts with large garrisons. This allowed his men to tighten the blockade and prevent any provisions reaching Bursa. The Ottoman siege lasted between 6 and 9 years. This was due to the fact that the Ottomans had no siege engines and they had never captured a large fortified city before. During the long siege, Osman and some of his military commanders conquered the smaller Byzantine fortresses on the vicinity of the Beylik, in which several tekfurs acknowledged Osman's sovereignty and became among his subjects, some of them accepting Islam in the process. Soon after that, Osman started suffering from gout and couldn't accompany his men in any more campaigns or witness the siege of Bursa, so he entrusted his son Orhan to complete this major task while he retired in his capital. Orhan continued the siege without any fighting, but he continued isolating Bursa from its surrounding forts, conquering Mudanya to cut off the city's connection to the sea. He also captured the city of Prenetos on the southern coast of Izmit, changing its name to Kara-Mursel, after the Muslim leader who took it, Kara-Mursel Bey. The last fort to fall was Bais, which was considered Bursa's key as it overlooked it, and it was renamed Orhaneli. Orhan tightened the blockade around Bursa till its garrison fell into despair. Soon the Byzantine emperor realized that the fall of the city into Muslim hands was inevitable. Thus, he made a difficult decision, ordering his governor to evacuate the city. Orhan entered Bursa on the 6th of April 1326. Its people were not subjected to any harm after they recognized Ottoman sovereignty and pledged to pay jizya. Saros, the garrison's leader, surrendered to Orhan and pledged allegiance to his father, Osman. He also converted to Islam and was given the title of Bey out of respect to his courage and patience during the long siege. According to some sources, Osman died just before the fall of the city, while others suggest that he lived long enough to hear about the victory on his deathbed. Family. Due to the scarcity of sources about his life, very little is known about Osman's family relations. According to certain 15th century Ottoman writers, Osman was descended from the Kai branch of the Oghuz Turks, a claim which later became part of the official Ottoman genealogy, and was eventually enshrined in the Turkish nationalist historical tradition with the writings of M.F. Koprulu. However, the claim to Kai lineage does not appear in the earliest extant Ottoman genealogies. Thus, many scholars of the early Ottomans regard it as a later fabrication meant to shore up dynastic legitimacy with regard to the empire's Turkish rivals in Anatolia. Yazıcıoğlu Ali, in the early 15th century, constructed a genealogy for Osman, tracing it back to Oghuz Kagan, the mythical ancestor of the Western Turks, through the eldest grandson of his eldest son, thereby lending legitimacy to the Ottoman Sultan's claim of primacy among Turkish monarchs. It is very difficult for historians to determine what is factual and what is legendary about the many stories the Ottomans told about Osman and his exploits, and the Ottoman sources do not always agree with each other. According to one story, Osman had an uncle named Dündar, with whom he had a quarrel early in his career. Osman wished to attack the local Christian lord of Bilecik, while Dündar opposed it, arguing that they already had enough enemies. Interpreting this as a challenge to his leadership position, Osman shot and killed his uncle with an arrow dot. This story first appears in Nesri's work, but is missing in earlier Ottoman historical works. If it was true, it means that it was likely covered up to avoid tarnishing the reputation of the Ottoman dynasty's founder with the murder of a family member. It may also indicate an important change in the relationship of the Ottomans with their neighbors, shifting from relatively peaceful accommodation to a more aggressive policy of conquest. Consorts. Osman I had two known consorts who were both his legal wives and some unknown concubines. Rabia Bala Hatun. She was the daughter of Sheikh Edebali and the mother of Alaeddin Ali Pasha. She spent the last years of her life with her father and died in Bilecik in 1324. She was buried next to her father's tomb, Kamariye Malhun Hatun, daughter of Umar Abdulaziz Bey. Called also Mal or Mala Hatun, she was the mother of Orhan Fulana Hatun, girl from humble social background with whom Osman became infatuated when he was very young. When she rejected his marriage proposal, believing it to be a joke, Osman kidnapped her and made her his concubine. Sons. Osman I had at least 8 sons, Fulan Bey, born before 1281, with Fulan Hatun. He was sent to the court of Giyasuddin III Kaikhusrau, Seljuk Sultan, to be raised in his house when Ertugrul signed peace with him. He had at least 3 sons, Ahmed, Bayad and Halil, and his descendants were still alive at the time of the reign of Bayezid I. Orhan, 1281-1362, with Malhun Hatun, second Ottoman ruler, Alaeddin Erden Ali Pasha, c. 1281-1331, with Rabia Bala Hatun, governor of Bilecik and founder of several mosques in Bursa. His descendants were still alive in the 16th century. Koban Bey, 1283-1337. He built a mosque in Bursa. Buried in Sogut in the Turba of Ertugrul, Pazali Bey, 1285. General of Orhan, he had at least two sons, Ilyas Bey and Murad Bey, and at least two daughters. Buried in Sogut in the Turba of Ertugrul, Hamid Bey, 1288-1329. Buried in Sogut in the Turba of Ertugrul, Murad Arslan Melik Bey, 1290-1336. He had at least one daughter, Melik Hatun, buried in Sogut in the Turba of Ertugrul, Savci Bey. He had at least one son, Suleiman Bey, buried in Sogut in the Turba of Ertugrul, daughters Usman, and had at least one daughter, Fatma Hatun, 1284, Sogut, 1347, Bursa. Personality. Ottoman historiography depicts Usman as a semi-holy person. It is known that among the Turkoman tribes, the tribe, or part of it, was named after its leader. The fact that the Kayi tribe became known by the name of Usman suggests that the tribe became powerful because of his excellent leadership. Orientalist R. Rachmanaliev writes that the historical role of Usman was that of a tribal leader, who enjoyed enormous success in uniting his people around him. The activities and personality of Usman as the founder of the state and dynasty are highly appreciated by historians of both the past and the present. The state and the dynasty of rulers are named after him. The population of the state was called Ottomans, Usmanlilar, until the beginning of the 20th century, that is, until the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Historian F. Uspensky notes that Usman relied not only on force but also cunningness. Historian and writer Lord Kinross writes that Usman was a wise, patient ruler whom people sincerely respected and were ready to serve him faithfully. He had a natural sense of superiority, but he never sought to assert himself with the help of power, and therefore he was respected not only by those who were equal in position, but also those who exceeded his abilities on the battlefield or on wisdom. Usman did not arouse feelings of rivalry in his people. Only loyalty. Herbert Gibbons believed that Usman was great enough to exploit masterful people. According to Simal Kafadar, death. According to the sources that say Usman lived to hear of the fall of Bursa, Orhan rushed back to Sogut to inform his father of his great victory. Once he reached it, he was immediately summoned to Usman, who was on his deathbed. Soon after Usman heard the news, he died from natural causes. However, Usman managed to name Orhan to be his successor, although the latter was not Usman's firstborn. Yet the dead emir believed that Orhan was better fit to rule than his elder half-brother Alaeddin, who was more passive and pious than Orhan. As for the exact cause of Usman's death, it is well known that he suffered from gout for several years, which seemingly caused his eventual death. This is confirmed by what Asik Pasazadeh mentioned in Tevari-i Ali Usman when he talked about the late period of Usman's life, saying, Usman had a bad foot from which he experienced severe pain. It is noted that Asik Pasazadeh used a similar expression when he talked about the death of Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror. The cause of his death was the issue in his feet. It is now known that gout is a genetic disease in the Ottoman dynasty, and many sultans suffered from it. The exact date of Usman's death is debatable. It is said that he died on the 21st of August 1326 at 70 years old. The 15th century Ottoman historian Ruhi Çelebi, who wrote down the history of the Ottoman Empire until 1481, indicates that Usman died in 1320. However, Uruk Adiloglu, another Ottoman historian who lived during the time of Sultans Mehmed the Conqueror and Bayezid II up until 1502, says that Usman died in 1327. Contemporary Turkish historian Nekdet Sakalglu states that, despite the absence of documents mentioning Usman's name after the year 1320, there are documents confirming Orhan's ascension to the throne in 1324. Based on this, Usman's death might have occurred in the same or previous year. It is also certain that Usman's death was after the death of his father-in-law, Sheikh Edebali, and after the death of his wife Rabia Bala Hatun, because it is known that Usman buried the two in Bilecik. Once Usman died, Orhan ordered the transfer of his body to Bursa, his new capital. Thus Usman's body was laid there to rest. His grave is located today in the neighborhood of Tufan. The reason behind the transferring Usman's body was due to a will Usman did tell his son about during the early years of besieging Bursa. My son, when I die, bury me under that silver dome in Bursa. However, Usman's current tomb dates back to the time of Sultan Abdulaziz, 1861-1876, because the first tomb was completely destroyed in a severe earthquake that struck the region in 1855. It was rebuilt by the aforementioned Sultan. Sultan Abdulhamid II, 1876-1909, also constructed a shrine in Sogut, where Usman was buried for a while before he was moved to Bursa. According to some sources, Usman left a written will to his son Orhan instructing him to move on with conquests and jihad against the Byzantines, that he abides by the teachings of Islam, accompany the ulama, amend his parish, and dedicates himself to spread the word of Islam. Legacy Usman is considered the founder of the Ottoman Dynasty, who started an imperial line that would expand to include 35 sultans, rulers of one of the largest and most powerful empires in world history. The Ottoman Empire lasted until 1918, when it disintegrated after defeat alongside other Central Powers in World War I. Usman is often referred to as the first in the line of Ottoman sultans, although he himself never carried this title in his life and was instead called Bey, or Emir. One endowment written in Persian and dating back to 1324 indicates that Usman was given the titles Muhyiddin, Reviver of the Faith, and Fakhruddin, Pride of the Faith. Usman's descendants are distributed today in several American, European and Arab countries after the royal Ottoman family was expelled from Turkey in 1924, shortly after the declaration of the Republic by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. Eventually, several family members returned to Turkey after the Turkish government allowed the females to return in 1951. However, male descendants had to wait until 1973 CE to be able to enter Turkey again. Other members remained in the countries where their ancestors had sought refuge, such as England, France, the United States, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, among others. Usman's descendants are known today as the Usmanoglu, son of Usman family. The sword of Usman, Turkish taklid-i seyf, was an important sword of state used during the coronation ceremony of the Ottoman sultans, starting with Sultan Murad II. The practice started when Usman was girt with the sword of Islam by his father-in-law Sheikh Edebali. The girding of the sword of Usman was a vital ceremony which took place within 2 weeks of a sultan's accession to the throne. It was held at the tomb complex at Eyüp on the Golden Horn waterway in the capital Constantinople. The fact that the emblem by which a sultan was enthroned consisted of a sword was highly symbolic. It showed that the office with which he was invested was first and foremost that of a warrior. The sword of Usman was girded onto the new sultan by the Sharif of Konya, a Mevlevi dervish who was summoned to Constantinople for that purpose. The reign of Osman Ghazi is a testament to the power of vision, unity and leadership. His ability to inspire loyalty, navigate complex political landscapes and lay the groundwork for a lasting empire is a remarkable example of effective leadership. Usman's foundational role in the Ottoman Empire was not just about territorial conquests, but about setting up an enduring system of governance that would outlast him and serve his successors for generations to come. In this episode, we've seen how Usman's strategic marriage alliances, his adherence to Islamic principles, and his diplomacy set a solid foundation for future expansion. His story teaches us that even in times of uncertainty and adversity, strong leadership combined with a clear vision can transform a region and its people into a powerful force on the world stage. Looking ahead, the seeds planted by Osman Ghazi would continue to flourish, as his successors would go on to expand the empire into a vast, multi-continental state. But the essence of the empire, its unity, its cultural foundation, and its military might, began with Osman Ghazi. As we move forward, we'll explore how his legacy shaped the course of Ottoman history. End of video. Thank you for watching this episode of The Rise and Fall of the Ottoman Empire, Lessons for Today. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the early foundations of the empire, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful episodes. In the next episode, we'll continue our journey through history, exploring the reign of Orhan Ghazi, Usman's son, and how the empire expanded and consolidated its power under his leadership. Leave your thoughts and questions in the comments below, and let's continue the conversation about the Ottoman Empire and its legacy in today's world. Stay tuned and see you in the next episode. Allah Hafiz.